What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pennell here. We're breaking down week 12 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. If you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. And it feels like a bit of a weird slate here. I wouldn't say there's any absolute must-play stacks this weekend. It seems like it's going to be spread out. Obviously, there's going to be some concentrated chalk at running back and wide receiver position. We see that every single week. Eventually something pops up, or just everybody kind of gets pointed in the same direction. So in tournaments, you try to have to get a little bit different. But for cash games this week, if you have the money for Jaden Daniels, he'd be my preferred option. Just the rushing floor. I know he hasn't been as good as he was earlier in the season, but just a great spot versus Dallas at home. Give it the fifth most points for quarterbacks. Like, I get it if you want to play Jaden Daniels. But we also have guys like Bo Nix, Kyler Murray. They have some rushing upside. They have some throwing upside. Their numbers look pretty similar on the season, to be honest. Bo Nix coming off an incredible game versus Atlanta Falcons. I know we all kind of liked Bo Nix last week, but I don't think we expected him to pull up that much. It would have been nice if he gave Cortland Sutton some love there, getting to the end zone, but unfortunately, that did not happen. Kyler Murray, yeah, you can play him in cash if you want. I feel like he's a better tournament play. Geno Smith's currently my best point per dollar option at the quarterback position. I just really like that game in general. We'll talk about it more when we go into the stacks here. I'm just trying to do some quick hitters for cash games. Then you have Anthony Richardson. Good game last week. I know he can be very boom or bust, but he does have that rushing floor, which I feel like all these guys have a bit of a rushing floor, which does make sense to have appeal for these kind of quarterbacks in cash games. Because if you look at them, besides Jordan Love, he doesn't really run the football. All these guys can run. I know we don't have any data on Tommy DeVito this year, but we've seen instances where he can run the football, and it's a great matchup versus the Buccaneers. They're allowing the most points for into quarterbacks. I know he's only $4,000, so if you get 14 points in cash games, that might just be enough, because then you can afford Christian McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown, some other guys that you might want to get into your lineups. Anthony Richardson, all these guys are almost averaging 0.4 rushing touchdowns per game and close to around 30, 40 rushing yards. So the floors are safe. Prices aren't too bad on any of these guys. You could honestly make a case for all of them in cash games, maybe besides Jordan Love. But personally, my favorite right now, probably Geno Smith, Jaden Daniels, and Anthony Richardson would be my top three. All right, so moving on to the stacks for tournaments. We'll sort this by salary and talk about the most expensive team first. And if you guys ever do an access to this sheet or the other sheets that I have on here that I do not show you, I set out the entire slate, go over showdowns, optimizer, ownership projections, cheat sheets, go over cash games, tournaments. You can find that link down below in the description. But we have Detroit up top here, and they're still below $6,000, so it's not like you're absolutely breaking the bank. And I liked the running backs a lot last weekend because I figured they were going to be blowing out Jacksonville and they'd kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit. Well, the running backs did well, but the entire team absolutely crushed. They did not take their foot off the gas. They just kept scoring points. So that was something I did not think was going to happen. But if they're going to just keep trying to absolutely destroy teams, it's not like it's a 14-point spread like last weekend versus the Jaguars. They're on the road, which does knock them down a little bit, but they're still in a dome. They're facing the Colts. They're a bit more of a capable team, but still a very high implied team total, 30.5, 50.5 point over under, 7.5 point spread. Everybody in Detroit pretty much projects well, so if you can afford them, if you can play them, by all means, go for it. Jared Goff is good in domes. He's obviously better at home, but still a fine matchup here versus Indianapolis Colts. But both running backs, kind of where my main interest is. Both are very viable plays. Kansas City Chiefs. So personally for me, I do not really like playing Patrick Mahomes these days. He just does not really have a ceiling anymore. It's been quite some years that it feels like yeah, I want to play Patrick Mahomes this week. I just haven't really had that feeling in quite some time. The projections never really say to play Patrick Mahomes. They're 10.5 point favorites on the road in Carolina. Still have a high implied team total. For me, it's mainly just I like the pieces from this offense. Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt, DeAndre Hopkins all project pretty well. And if you want to get weird, you can play Patrick Mahomes maybe with an Xavier Worthy. They just missed on a big play last week, and he's got upside every single time they can hit a big play, but it's just not really something I expect from this Chiefs offense too much. We'll talk about Kareem Hunt more when we go with running backs, but overall, it's a team with a high implied team total. They're not that expensive. Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals. This is going to be a game that I'm looking to target quite a bit in GPPs. You can even get there in cash games depending on the pieces. But we have a 47.5 point over under, only a 1 point spread here, so it should be back and forth. But these defenses can have their issues, and there's just lots of good offensive pieces. Like for Geno Smith, we have DK Metcalf, JSN, Tyler Lockett, whoever else they want to throw out there. At tight end, you have Kenneth Walker out of the backfield. For Arizona, it's a little bit more so. I just really like Kyler Murray and James Conner. But if you are in tournaments and trying to get different, that's who people are going to play. So instead of just running Kyler Murray naked, you could throw in Marvin Harrison Jr., even though I know he's been a bit of a disappointment this year. You can throw in Trey McBride if you want. Just go for the full stack, run it back with someone like DK Metcalf. That makes a lot of sense in tournaments for me. I don't think the ownership's going to be anything too crazy. And honestly, looking at projected ownership overall, I mean, nothing really screams like, oh my gosh, the ownership's so bad. I just have to fade this team, this game. So honestly, I feel like it's a slate where if you want to play a spot, you can do it. Maybe just pivot a couple of pieces, and that might just be good enough. Looking at Green Bay here versus the 49ers, we still need some news on Brock Purdy. If he plays, obviously all the pieces from that offense are perfectly fine with Christian McCaffrey, Quan Jennings, Deebo Samuel. George Kittle's going to be back this week, so they'll be pretty much fully healthy, although Brock Purdy's obviously a big question mark right now, so we'll have to see what happens there. But I like the Packers side of things for GPPs because they have the higher implied team total. They're playing at home. I mean, the 49ers are dogs. That doesn't really happen too often. 46.5 point over-under in this game. Jordan Love, while it's kind of hard to peg who I want to stack with him, we know he's going to throw touchdowns. He does it every single week. Doesn't really run the ball too much, so you're playing Jordan Love. Get guys like Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft in your lineups, and if you're looking at the projections for quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, some of the best on the entire board this weekend. Now, I do like them a bit more on FanDuel. I do like Josh Jacobs a lot more over there, but either site, I like them, but they're just a little bit cheaper on FanDuel comparatively. Washington versus Dallas. Not a ton of interest in Dallas, although it is pretty easy to run it back with CeeDee Lamb or Shoemaker. I think it's how you say his name, whatever. He's 2,500 tight end. Should go better than the Davis Allen play last week. Obviously, that was very disappointing, but I think with him being the tight end one, we saw it with Cooper Rush. I think it's a little bit safer this weekend, but Lamb's not that expensive. And both guys, I mean, that's where Cooper Rush went with the ball. We know he's going to be under center once again, but Washington's at home. Second highest implied team total of the week at 29.5. They are 10.5 point favorites, which is the one concern, but we're stacking this game up. If you're not playing Brian Robinson, who I like a lot this week, Jane Daniels paired with Aaron McLaurin, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz, some combination of that looks fine in tournaments. Just an easy matchup versus Dallas's pretty weak defense this year. And then Denver, not a huge fan of any of the Las Vegas pieces. I do like Jacoby Myers. He'll be chalky on the slate if you don't play him in cash games. They are 6-point dogs. They should be throwing the ball. Obviously not a great spot versus Denver, but I mean, they got to move the ball somehow. But the Denver offense in general looks pretty good. Fair team total at 24.5. And Bo Nix, he's been playing great. And I think with some recency bias that maybe picks up his ownership a little bit. But Cortland Sutton should be the highest owned wide receiver on the slate. So that kind of sucks from an ownership perspective, but he does look good. I believe Vele, I re-say his name, he would be a viable option as the wide receiver 2 in that offense. The running back's not something I'm overly interested in because it's a bit of a timeshare these days, but I do like Bo Nix and some of his pass catchers for sure. All right, moving over to our build. Like I always say, guys, the purpose of this is not for me to build you a lineup. You should build your own lineup so you can use a similar process that I use every single week to build single entry type lineups. We're not building million makers here. I think it's a waste of time. If you're maxing it, obviously you get a bit of edge on that, but it's still very bad content to be in. So let's grab a quarterback here. There are several that I like, but Geno Smith at this price point, hard to pass up. I'm hoping this game is a bit of a track meet. We're playing at home. Let's roll with that and move on to running backs. And we have lots of options this week. So if you want to spend up, go in the middle or down low. I think we have you covered. Now, if we are talking cash games specifically, and it's really easy to get different in tournaments because a lot of these running backs always have very, very similar projections. So, I mean, if one's going to be 30% owned, the other one's going to be 15% owned, it's like a point or two off in projection. Just play the one that's lower owned if you already have a chalkier lineup. If you already don't have a chalkier lineup, it's fine to play it. Like, people get caught up too much, I think, in individual player ownership. I mean, if you have a pretty chalky lineup, but you have a really low owned quarterback wide receiver stack paired with it, like, that's perfectly fine, especially if you're not playing if you're playing a single entry, like that is perfectly fine. And that's enough to get you different in a contest like that. But for cash games, I would say the big three for ownership is going to be Devon Chan, Kareem Hunt, and then after that, it gets a little bit picky. Maybe James Conner and Brian Robinson. For me, my favorite three are probably Chan, Hunt, and Brian Robinson. If you have the money for Christian McCaffrey, you can do that. I did just get news, though, like 2 minutes ago that Brock Purdy not seen a practice once again. And it is Friday, so we are running out of time here. So it does concern me for just the overall potential production for this offense. Because if Brock Purdy, I know Brock Purdy is not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not that much of a game changer, but when you take the starting quarterback out of a lineup, I mean, it's obviously just going to hurt you a bit. And on the road in Green Bay, I mean, this could be a spot to maybe be a little bit off the 49ers, especially if he happens to not be a go. That's definitely going to bring everyone down a little bit. Christian McCaffrey will still be in play. He'll just get a ton of volume, but obviously the potential efficiency could go down with that. So it's something to keep an eye out on. But, I mean, McCaffrey, I mean, for his projection, his price point, it's still low for CMC. I've noticed that the price tags on some of these players this year, especially at the running back position, have not been getting too high. So he's still at a fair price point. But like if CMC is going to have ownership still, like just pivot the Joe Mixon. I know it's not the best matchup versus Tennessee by all means, but he just gets so much volume. 25.4 opportunities per game, 1.3 rushing touchdowns per game this year, over 20 carries, 4 targets, nearly 100 rushing yards, and he's going to get the goal line work, and they're 8-point favorites at home. Like, I mean, Joe Mixon's an awesome tournament play, especially if CMC is going to have more ownership. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs could be a direct pivot off of Devon Chan this weekend. They honestly get pretty similar opportunities. 16.9 per game for Jahmyr Gibbs, 17.3 for Devon Chan. And if you're looking at their usage, I mean, it's pretty similar. Both guys aren't getting like 20 carries on the ground, but Gibbs has been a lot more efficient. He's in a better offense this season with a higher implied team total. He's not getting as much work through the air, but I mean, both guys obviously excellent plays, but Gibbs is going to be much lower owned. Kenneth Walker on both sides, DraftKings and FanDuel. Like, that's a really low price point for Kenneth Walker at $1,600 in a game that should be pretty high scoring. It's a good matchup versus Arizona. I mean, I like him quite a bit. Josh Jacobs probably more of a FanDuel play, but if you're not playing the passing game from Green Bay, I mean, I don't hate Josh Jacobs here. Dave Montgomery, I mean, it's the same thing with him and Gibbs every single week. Gibbs has a bit of a better floor because of the receiving upside, but Dave Montgomery, I mean, he's still getting 2.3 targets per game, 16 opportunities. He's going to get goal line work. I mean, if he gets the touchdowns, which he seems to pretty much always do, I would say that's not much of a safer bet in the league than Dave Montgomery getting a touchdown most weeks, maybe outside of Derrick Henry. James Conner, one of my favorite plays, $6,500. Already talked about him. Kareem Hunt with no Isaiah Pacheco, just the best matchup you can ask for versus Carolina Panthers, 7.5-point favorite, high implied team total, averaging 23 opportunities per game this year. I mean, no reason not to like him. Brian Robinson in a very similar situation, slightly higher implied team total, also 10.5-point favorite. He's playing at home though, and while he's not really involved in the passing game, if we're going to get 15 plus carries here, I mean, I would be kind of surprised if he does not get into the end zone. And you don't have to do it this week because I just really haven't found myself really needing to go down that low at the running back position. But if you have to, Amir Abdullah with no Zamir White and no Alexander Madison, they're both listed as doubtful. Just got that news. Abdullah should be the guy that I would say is the most appealing in that backfield. He's going to get some work in the passing game, which does boost that floor a little bit. I mean, he is free on FanDuel, free on DraftKings. It's a really ugly spot, though. I mean, you don't have to do it, but if you're in need for salary relief, he's your guy. All right, moving over to our build here. Since I'm playing Geno Smith, I am probably going to double stack with him. I mean, you don't have to, but I think that's just the route I want to go. So like a DK Metcalf JSN would make a lot of sense. So I don't think they're going to have extremely high ownership, so I could probably get a little bit chalkier at the running back position. So I want to play Kareem Hunt. I really like that price point. It's just really hard to get away from. And then I guess I'll also play James Conner because, I mean, I guess he can work as the run back option in this game if I just want to full stack it, which I do think it should get a decent amount of points. And James Conner is involved in the passing game and the run game, so either way, you should be fine. So we'll move on to wide receivers. And we always try to keep this as simple as possible. If we are stacking, we're directly looking at our direct stacking partners before we move on to other pieces. So I might like Malik Neighbors, I might like CeeDee Lamb. But for example, if I have Geno Smith, I got to look at guys like DK Metcalf and JSN first. If I have Anthony Richardson, you don't have to stack with him, but if you're going to, I mean, you look directly at like a Josh Downs first or whoever else, Alec Pierce, doesn't matter. So if we're talking cash games though, I would say the best options are probably these mid-range guys. So I would assume that Cortland Sutton and Jacoby Myers will probably end up being the highest owned wide receivers, at least that's what I have projected currently. Cortland Sutton, number 1 on the week. Just a good matchup overall versus the Raiders for the Denver Broncos. I know they've been kind of stingy versus wide receivers this year, but Sutton's at 8.5 targets per game. This offense should have put up some points. 41% market share of the team's air yards this season. Kind of a down week. I mean, Sutton still was okay, but he just did not get into the end zone, which was disappointing after what we saw from Bo Nix. But he's pretty much cash game option number 1 at wide receiver. Jacoby Myers number 2. And also, just not a good matchup here, but they're 6-point dogs, and the ball's got to go somewhere. And Jacoby Myers should be the benefactor of that. Outside of that, I really don't think there's another great cash game wide receiver that really completely stands out. I would say Jennings would be my 3rd favorite, but I do have some serious concerns here of Brock Purdy not playing, just not at practice on Friday. And if he just ends up not suiting up, we get the likes of Brandon Allen, which, I mean, we'll see. I know the 49ers system can really hide bad quarterback play, but still, Purdy is out. I don't know if I want to pay $5,600 for Jennings. I don't know if I'd really want to pay $6,500 for Debo, so that's a bit of a TBT situation. If Purdy is in, good to go. Jennings would be my number 3 though. And as you can see, those all guys are in the 5K range. So you can really save some money here and kind of have some nice balance to your lineups this weekend. Now, if you're playing Jared Goff. Or if you have the money to spend up, Amon-Ra St. Brown would be the #1 option. He's just been scoring touchdowns at a great pace this year. 2 touchdowns last week, and they were up, and they just kept throwing. So, I mean, this game should be closer. At least I would hope for the Indianapolis Colts. But even if it's not, maybe that's not as much of a concern as it could be for other teams. Other than that, a lot of this is really just stacking options. Maybe some more standalone plays would be guys like Calvin Ridley and Josh Downs I could see being viable pieces. But other than that, we're kind of just correlating with the quarterbacks. And back to the build here. Let's just get our double stack in with Geno. This is not something you always have to do. I mean, you could single stack with him. I wouldn't have a big issue with that. But we're going to double stack here. We have run back with Connor so that we can move on to tight end. Not a big position this week. If you are playing cash games, you need the savings. I mean, Shoemaker down there, he's $2,500. He should have a big role in this offense. And then other than that, Travis Kelce is probably another cash game option if you have the money, which usually back in the day, we'd say if we have the money for Kelce because he's around $7,000 to $8,000, we're getting him below $6,000 these days. And he is playing Carolina Panthers, which I know tight end DVP numbers can be a bit noisy, but they are dead last in the league. 60 yards and 0.7 receiving touchdowns per game to the position. And I played Kelce on FanDuel last week, and it sucked. What do you have, like 6 yards? Just brutal. Still averaging 8 targets per game, 25% target share. Hopefully we can have a bounce back game. But man, them being 11-point favorites, it does concern me if they get up early. And Travis Kelce had absolutely nothing to do with it. But really cheap on DK. So I would say him or Shoemaker. Schoonmaker, I don't know how you say it, would be the top options there. Brock Bowers, if the ball's not going to Jacoby Myers, it's probably going to Bowers. I'd say those are the two guys the ball flows through over in Las Vegas. Trey McBride could be a fine tournament option in the game. Maybe if you are playing Kyler Murray, you can pair him up with that. Jonnu Smith, big game last week, $4,100. Hunter Henry, $4,000. But these guys are basically in the same spots as they were last week. So if you like them last week, I mean, they're like the same thing once again, projection-wise. And if you're playing Jaden Daniels, Zach Ertz could be a fine stacking option. But other than that, I don't think I'd play Zach Ertz in a standalone. All right, let's go to the build here. We have $4,800 left and 4 spots to do it. We'll plug in a cheap defense so we actually know what kind of money we have to work with. Bears at home with the Vikings on the road outside of the dome. I mean, that's been working, so I'll roll with that. Now we have 3 spots, around $5,500. There's a couple ways we can go. We could go punt tight end. We could try to spend up a little bit more. We'll go through a couple of different builds here. So if we go with the punt route, that gives us $7,100. So we could afford a guy. If you wanted to spend all the way up, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, Lamb, like any of these guys would be perfectly fine. I don't want to double up on the pass catchers for Dallas, so I would say just go St. Brown in this one. Then we'd have $5,900. And that puts you in a really good range. I mean, Jaden Reed for GPPs, Tony Pollard, not a big fan of that one. No Spears this week, but still. Cortland Sutton, Travis Kelce, Calvin Ridley, Brian Robinson. I love all these plays. Jennings, maybe a Purdy plays. That is a really good range to be in. If you wanted to spend up a little bit at tight end, say you wanted to go the Kelce route. Yeah, we'll go the Kelce route for this one. Wide receiver, $5,400. You could still end up going like a Calvin Ridley instead of Sutton. That'll be lower ownership, $5,200. That takes us just outside of the Brian Robinson range, unfortunately. So maybe if you spend down a little bit more from Ridley, say we went Jacoby Myers maybe, and then you could still fit in, like a Brian Robinson. There, $5,800 would be pretty good. So a couple routes you can go. So the main pieces of this build, we have Geno Smith paired with DK Metcalf, JSN. We have our running back option in James Conner, Kareem Hunt at running back, Bears defense, and honestly flex, tight end, wide receiver. It can be anything you want. If we wanted to try a Joe Mixon build at $8,000, because I really do like him. I know he probably plays early and one of these guys plays later, so just pretend I switched them around. You'd have, I believe James Conner's in the 4 slot, so you'd put him at flex in that situation. But we could still roll with, I guess, Shoemaker probably. Yeah, they give you $6,200 for the wide receiver 3 spot, which really good range. Josh Downs, Marvin Harrison would actually make a lot of sense for this specific lineup. Jameson Williams, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley. So I think the builds are pretty fun this week, and there's a lot of creativity you can get with it. So I would say have fun building and make the best of it. And it looks like we got our crunch in, so let's see what we got here. And for the players tab, yeah, Brian Robinson just getting jammed in a lot of lineups here. Broncos defense. Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers. Makes a lot of sense. I think those are probably going to be the 2 highest wide receivers, at least as of right now on Friday evening. This could, of course, change by the time Sunday rolls around. Kareem Hunt, Devon Chan, probably the 2 highest on running backs this week. I'm probably just a little bit higher than the field this week projection-wise on Brian Robinson, but I do think Kareem Hunt and Devon Chan will be the highest on running backs. Geno Smith, James Conner. I mean, it looks like, it almost looks like our build, obviously, in a couple different ways. JSN showing up quite a bit. DK Metcalf down there. So it does look like the builds we were talking about. So let's look at the first one here. We have Geno Smith. Should be paired with one pass. Yeah, JSN right there. Did not double stack, but I mean, guys, if you want to double stack with Geno, that's perfectly fine. And Brian Robinson, yeah, looks like a pretty solid lineup. I'm curious to see Jaden Daniels lineup here. So we have it paired with Terry McLaurin. Ends up getting ran back with Shoemaker down there, and overall the lineup. And CeeDee Lamb as well, so it's a double run back, which is fine. I mean, you can specify if you don't want that to happen, but I just did some quick settings here. And if we look at the teams, Denver, Washington, KC, Seattle, Arizona, Dallas, Las Vegas, Miami. Shouldn't be anything too surprising. Loves the Las Vegas Denver game. And it's not like that game's going to be like a 60-point game, but just certain pieces in that project so well. Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, the Broncos defense. That's just kind of what gets pumped in. With that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel for brand new. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you leave them down below. More than happy to answer them. Wish you all the best, and I'll see you all next time.